This is a tutorial for assignment number 7, the perspective grid. So I'm going to start a new document, and I'm doing it something very wide, like a 20 by 10 inches in a very wide landscape format in CMYK. Sure, let's get started. So to see your perspective grid, if it does not appear in your toolbox right here, make sure that you are in the regular Essentials Classic workspace, and it will appear there. Once you click on it, it appears by default automatically in the middle of your page, and by default it's a 2-point perspective. You have one right here, and you can change the nodes right there, and you have the second point right there. To change your perspective, if you don't want to have a 2-point perspective, if you want a single point or 3-point perspective, you have to go under View, Perspective Grid, and you switch over, let's say, to the 1-point perspective, for example. And that changes to only a single point perspective. And again, all those nodes are customizable. You can extend each of those. You can move the whole thing over. You can expand, move the your perspective in whichever angle you want. Change your horizon right here. Expand or decrease the size of your perspective, etc., etc. It's all there, right? I'm going to switch over to, again, View Perspective Grid, and I'm going to go to a 3-point perspective point right there. Now you have one right here, you have one down there. Let me move the whole thing over so we can actually see it right there. It's actually past my edge. It's the one down there, again, right here. So you can change the whole thing right here. This is the horizon, and etc. So again, all of those nodes are to customize your point, your grid, how you want to have them selected. You can actually split your, doesn't want to let me, there you go. You can actually split your perspective as well, those perspective panels. You can crisscross them for extra crazy effects, etc. So everything's customizable. So I'm going to switch back to the 2-point perspective, which was the point of this exercise. And I'm not going to go into details too much or customize it too much in this case. As you can see right there, I can increase or decrease the scale of the perspective, and I'm just going to extend it just a little bit. I'm not going to move that too much, but in this particular exercise, number 7 right there, you have a little bit of a gap right there to create that building, right? So the facade has a chiseled corner. I'm going to push this a little bit further out, and same thing here. I'm just going to go straight out there like this, so we can actually have it a little bit flatter, so we can see a little bit more of a facade. So as soon as you click on the perspective grid tool right here, this appears, but also this little widget appears right there, and it's color-coded. You can see that the left panel right there is blue, the right panel is orange, and then the ground or the bottom panel is green. And all it does is you can select whichever panel you're going to work in, right? So in this case, I want to stick to the blue panel right here. I'm going to make, let's say, a basic shape like this. I'm going to make it green. I'm just going to grab my rectangle tool. Again, you have to have whichever left grid, or in this case, I have the left grid selected, but whichever grid you want to work on, selected from the widget right up here. And as I click and drag in there, it sticks to the grid, and it makes my shape fit my perspective right there. So I can, well, that's kind of ugly because it's really, really ugly and green. Let's make it, let's see if I have some swatches to open. Yes, right there. Let's make it gray because it's boring. It's a gray building. But then basically that's what it is, right? So I'm going to switch over to my orange. I just have to switch over to my perspective tool, the grid tool first. Switch to my orange or the right panel right here. And I'm going to create another one right here. And again, I'm just making that very, very quickly for just a demonstration right here. Things are not going to line up, but I'm changing the color a little bit so you have a little bit of a highlight and a low light. And of course, things are not going to line up. So to make the vertical panel in the center, I just have to make sure that I exit my perspective grid tool, because if I still stick to, you know, if I still have it visible, it'll still stick to that, right? So I'm going to undo that very quickly. So to hide the perspective tool, to be able to work outside of it, just go into view right here, perspective grid, and you just hide the grid. And now I can make my center panel right there. So I'm just going to snap it to the edges right there. As you can see, it's not snapping at all. I'm going to make it a little darker. And I'm going to go again, show my perspective tool. So now what I want to do is I want to make sure that this right panel there in the orange perspective is going to snap over. So if I just, you know, grab that panel and I just extend it, well, it doesn't stick to the grid anymore. It gets completely wonky, and then I'm off the grid. So how do I do that? I'm going to undo that quickly. I have to switch over from the perspective tool right here. There's a little arrow in the bottom right corner. You press and hold, you have the perspective selection tool. And that allows me to grab an object, select it, change its size, and still stick to the grid. And I'm going to snap it right here to the edge right there. And now happiness is walls that do line up. So I'm just going to, again, I'm going to hide the grid again. Whoops. I'm going to go and hide the grid again. Go into perspective grid, hide the grid. It's you can see it's Shift Command I, or probably Shift Control I on a PC. And let's see if it works. There you go. So now you can see, oh, they're almost lining up. I didn't do a good job on this one, but you know, you can zoom in when you're working in the perspective tool. So in this case, I have my basic shape for my my building right here. I'm missing the sidewalk, I'm missing the ground, and what I can do is I can just, you know, show that grid again, and I'm going to add just a basic ground right here. I'm just going to move it over here. There you go. I'm just going to put some basic ground. Ooh, sorry, wrong perspective again. There you go. I'm going to put some basic ground right here. Right, I'm just going to snap it right here. So this is kind of like the left, on the left-hand side. And you can see it right there. I can make it really big. And I'm going to make those a lot lighter so we can see what we're doing right here. So very, very basic stuff. Again, I'm going to hide the grid again to make my horizon right here. And, you know, I'm just going to put this in the background. And I'm going to make that dirt color, right? So we can see that this is a parking lot. Ish. Again, I'm going to show my grid, and I'm going to modify my parking lot and then turn it into a sidewalk instead, like so, right? Again, switch over to your perspective selection tool to be able to change a shape within the grid, right? So I'm just going to extend my quote-unquote sidewalk. This one really extended way out of there. So I'm going to try to drag it back in there. And there you go. There you go. Now they're crisscrossing in there and things are happy. So since this thing is really big, I don't need to have it that long. Again, you know, it's just a matter of snapping things to the right spot. And I'm going to use my eyedropper right here to make it the same color. Actually, I should have made that the same color this way right there. So it's not perfect, far from being perfect, but this is kind of how it functions. So the cool thing about the perspective selection tool is I'm going to show you something. First, I have to hide again the grid, right? So we're going to go under View, Perspective Grid, hide the grid, and I'm going to make something on the side, right? So I'm not sticking to my grid right here. So I'm just going to push this thing on the side, and I'm just going to, you know, create a bunch of square right here. Is going to, you know, put a little bit of a fading sky into it, or maybe not. I'm just going to make it white for now, just white for now. And I'm just going to drag it. I'm pressing my Option or Alt key from the PC, and then pressing also my Shift key so it sticks to the horizontal right here. And then once I have this, I can also go Command D or Control D to duplicate it, right? So I'm just creating a quick little grid like this. The other option is you select your square right here, you go under Effect, go to Transform, and you get that little dialog window right here. And here you see the number of copies you can move, you can do. So you can move it horizontally. So, you have your preview right there, and you can just go, move it slightly right there because it's not really measuring the size of my shape right there. It's only about 1 3/8 or so, perfect. And you can make copies of it. So you can make, let's say, 5 copies. So that's also another quick trick, is using the transform effect to make a grid out of a single object. So again, it's just as if I switch over to my outline preview, it's a single object that has an effect on it. So you can drag it around and it'll follow, but it's not an object. So if I bring that into my perspective grid, that's not going to work. So you first need to go under your object, expand appearance, and then now you have 5 objects, right? So that's the difference right here. So I'm just going to make that very, very quickly. I'm going to make that actually, I'm going to give it a gradient right here, but the gradient goes from blue to 0% opacity blue. So I'm going to change that to 100%, and I'm going to double click on my node right here. I'm going to make that white. I'm going to put it at 90 degree so that it kind of looks like a window-ish, or I'm going to switch that around right there. So they look like windows-ish. It's kind of, a few quick little rough things. So I'm just going to add a couple more rows, for example, just holding and pressing my Alt or Option key and Command D or Control D to duplicate. So here I have a bunch of windows. They look great. Maybe let's make them a little bit more vertical like this. Now I want to bring those windows onto this facade right here. I switch over. I want to move them to this facade right here. So I switch over to my perspective selection tool. Again, I have to show the grid, right? And then switch over to perspective grid. Now I have it selected. I make sure that I'm in the left or blue panel right here. And I literally just drag it over. And it'll stick to that facade right here. And now I have 3 rows of windows, just like that. That's the cool trick about this tool. Again, since those are grouped, right, I have to select them all. So I'm pressing and holding my Shift key. My perspective move tool right here, I can just move it all the way up into the corner. So I can put a door in there, whatever you want, right? It's really, really open. Another cool thing is, again, I'm going to hide the grid, and I'm going to do some type right here. I'm going to put some type right on the corner of this building right here, and I'm going to put, instead of typing something like this, like coffee shop, horizontal, that won't work in my vertical. So I'm going to switch over and do a vertical type tool right here. So now I can go like this. Now we're talking, right? Coffee shop, and I'm going to make that. Let's see. Yeah, I don't have very many fonts installed on this machine, but something like that. Yeah, sure. Rockwell bold, extra bold. Sure, that's perfectly fine, right? I'm going to make it a little bigger. I may have. There you go. And then I'm going to, of course, it's black, so I'm going to make it white with a stroke on it. And then I'm going to, again, switch over to my perspective tool, switch over to my perspective selection tool, and I'm just going to drag it over. Oh, actually, in this case, it's my vertical thing. So I'm just going to drag it over and put it on the side of the building right here. Actually, before I do that, I copy this. I drag it over on the side of my building right here. I can make it bigger, right? There you go. I'll make it really, really big and really stretched up. Doesn't really matter. I'm going to switch over to my right perspective panel right here. I'm just going to paste and then drag it again, right? Because I had copied it over into my my pasteboard right here, and then I put it just at the very end of the building right here. So this is how you drag text into your perspective. This is how you drag text in your perspective. And of course, I select that, get rid of this. Oh, it won't let me. So if you want to change if you want to change your type right here, because I have that stroke right here, you have to go to your appearance panel, which is the little sun right here, sun or dot, the circle with a little dot around. You can go in, if it's not on your tools right there, you can go into Windows, and then it's in alphabetical order, so it's near the top. It's appearance right here. This object, because it's in the perspective, this object right now is in the perspective, so I can't edit it. So again, you have to hide your perspective again. Now select your object, and it's a perspective object, so I can't. Huh, what do you know? All right. So this object right now, being in the perspective, you have to go again in your perspective selection tool, and this is where you change things, right? So you get rid of the stroke. No, it does not. This is odd. I think it's a, oh yeah, there it is. It's a text. So here, I mean, no. So this object right here that you have put in there, because it's in the perspective, you cannot change the stroke. You cannot change the color. It's very odd. It's a very weird kind of setting right here. So I think you have to go under Object and Expand. There you go. Now it's an object, not a type anymore. So let's see if we can change that now. Now we can change it. There you go. See, now we can change the fill, the stroke, have no fill at all, etc., etc. So it's not exactly the best easy way to do it. In this case right here, in the blue case right here, if you double click on your text right there, it's still editable, right? So I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and then you can make that one. The coffee corner, for example. I don't know, I don't know. I don't drink coffee, so I'm not sure. Reduce the size of the type. So when because it's live type, you can still edit it. But once you pick a color, it's very difficult to maneuver and move around. So again, I can just, make sure that this is in my perspective right here. Just gonna snap it right here. So that's kind of how it functions. Really, like my sidewalk is not as far from being perfect right here. I'm gonna hide the grid so I can actually start editing shapes. In this case right here, I want to merge those sidewalks right here. Maybe I want to merge them. Maybe I'll keep them in the same perspective right there. I'm just going to stick it in there, keep it in there. But what I can do, for example, in this case right here, I have this wall right here. I'm going to make it, let's see if there's a terracotta looking wall right here. Oh, no, sorry, that's the stroke. I'm going to make it, let's say, a bit of a brown color, dark brown color. But what I can do here is I can add texture to it. And textures only work flat. They do not work in perspective. So I'm going to demonstrate that quickly. I go under Effects right here, and I go under Texture, and I go Texturizer right here. That opens up a little dialog window right here. I can zoom in a little bit so you can see your texture right here. And in this case right now, my texturizer is canvas. So I can switch over to bricks right there, and there I have bricks. I can change the scaling of my bricks. I can make them bigger. In this case, I want to make them quite large, and you can change the relief of it so they're a little bit more, far more contrast, or that's a little too much. So I'm going to bring it down. The light is right now coming from the top. You can change it to the top right, the top left. You get the idea. Bottom right, etc. That changes your basically your shadows. So I'm gonna go from the top left right here. So it really looks like a nice brick wall. Click OK, and there it is. I have a texture on this wall right there. It looks like the real Calgary 1980s building, street corner building. on that note, I wanted to show you that, for example, on perspective right there, if I switch over, let's say if I again show my perspective and select my object right here on the right hand side there, my lighter color brown, lovely wall. If I add again, if I switch over and if I want to add my texturizer again, I can just go apply texturizer again, and you can see that the bricks are not following the perspective. So it only works on really flat surfaces, right? So because the perspective of your texture right here is not going to follow that. If I, as an example, I'm going to try to do this. Actually, I'm going to make a shape outside of my grid, show the grid again, apply the texture to this thing, right? Apply my bricks, and then I'm going to move that, or I'm going to try to move that to my orange panel, or my perspective on the right hand side. So if I drag it around, again, same thing right here on top, and see, as you can see, the texture is still staying vertical and horizontal, so it does not follow the perspective. So if you want to create a brick pattern, right, the best and simplest option would be to create it with a bunch of shapes, right? So you'd have to first hide your grid again. You'd make, your little bricks right there side by side, and then you'd have to, create your brick wall like this, right? So it's kind of time consuming. So I'm just going to create this brick pattern very, very quickly here. I'm just going to drag that around like this very quickly, and that should do it. Actually, let's make this. I can also just bring a little bit of variety to my colors, a little bit, so it's not so boring and repetitive, like so. Quickly, I can go under, again, I can go under Object, Pattern, Make. A pattern has been added to my swatch. Perfect. This is my panel option right here. And again, this is my selection right here for my pattern right there. So I can, reduce the width right here. I'm just gonna try to fit it perfect. It's not going to be perfect. So I'm gonna make 1.45. That's not enough. 1.7, there you go. And then the height will be just a notch above as well. So I'm just gonna fudge it until I get it right. Approximately, perfect, good. There's my brick pattern right there. I'm gonna save that. So I can move this out of the way. And again, so I'm going to try to make that shape right there. So if I fill it with my new pattern right here that I have in my swatches right here, is my brick pattern, right? It only is horizontal, vertical, of course. I'm going to switch over to show my perspective tool right here. And again, I'm going to stay with in my orange pattern right here, and if I create a new object, again, the pattern does not follow the perspective. So, so there it is. So there's the limitation of your perspective tool, and your perspective grid is patterns as well as textures do not follow the perspective. So on something like this, instead of using a pattern or texture right there that has a little bit of a grid pattern like this brick, for example, you can always add a little bit of a texture, but in the different kind of way. You go in again, you go into your effects, your textures right there, and Texturizer, but instead of a brick pattern, which again that does not follow the lines, you can switch over to maybe burlap. Nah, not so great. Sandstone, maybe. That makes more sense. You can zoom in a little bit. You can see that it just kind of looks like a stucco. Again, top left, top right, and that changes your shadows and whatnot. The scaling does not have to be that big. The relief does not have to be just subtle little texture. There you go. So a texture like this, again, I'm hiding the grid. A texture like this works a little better than the brick, but the brick, I just wanted to show you that just for that front panel, which is straight and in front of you, so it's perfectly fine. So at this point, you can add trees to it. You can, design other elements. You can put a car in there if you really want to. But again, this is how to use your perspective tool, how to use your perspective selection tool to be able to move, scale, and add objects to your grid. So this is a quick little demo right there, and I hope that that really helps you figure assignment number 7. Have fun.